Hey, hello everyone. Welcome. How are you?
I am good. How about yourself?
It is very warm where I am. I'm surviving.
Mm, yeah, same here. For those of us who are American, it is the day after 4th of July. If you do hear explosions in the background, pretty sure that's normal. We're gonna be fine. People are still letting off their fireworks today.
Yes, yeah. And we are usually recording when it's already dark for poor peppers.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. So, hello everyone. Welcome to Malevolent Autopsy. If you're new here, welcome. This is a show hosted by patrons featuring patron content as Malevolent is in its fifth season updating live. Show is chock full of spoilers since every episode is meant to comment on a live update. So if you want to avoid spoilers for all of Malevolent as it's been released up to chapter 220, check out now and you can come back later. Our episodes are recorded live like this, so you can always listen back later. I am Queen and I go by she, her pronouns, and I am today in control of Arthur's right eyelid. I had the left one last time.
Beautiful. And I am Peppers. I also go by she, her. And I'm in control of Arthur's shoulder, but kind of that one nerve that twitches when you're in like a weird position. I'm that one.
Beautiful. I love it. The specificity is everything to me. Peppers, do you want to give us our chapter summary?
Absolutely. So we are on chapter 220. We have just ended with Yorick proposing his deal to John and Arthur, requesting to use the hag's hand whenever he sees fit. Arthur agrees to Yorick's deal. He is very understanding of the circumstances that forced John to make the deal, and he doesn't blame him. Um, Arthur asks Yorick how he'd like them to use the hand, but at the moment, Yorick doesn't have anything and suggests that by nightfall, he might have some instructions for them. He also calls them the Dies Irae and explains that it means the day of wrath. Arthur asks why that's their title, and Yorick ominously says, "You will see." As they continue their journey through the forest, Alexander the owl flies near them and appears to have been following them. We have this really funny moment where Yorick and John surmise that the owl is trying to hunt them for food, and Arthur has to explain to them that owls can't eat humans. John demands that they not be waylaid by the owl, which sparks a memory in Arthur about the waylay. He recounts his time at the waylay, explaining to John that when he died, he arrived there. He remembers patrons either standing or sitting. He starts to get fuzzy on the details, but when John presses him if he could see, Arthur says that he can't remember. He brings up the theory that he was dreaming there, but Yorick clarifies that he was indeed dead. Arthur asks for Yorick's opinion on the waylay, but Yorick states that he's never heard of it, and John has no knowledge on it. Arthur also recalls that the blood and sand drink was waiting for him, which implies that someone knows his preferred drink order. Their conversation concludes, night falls, and the episode ends with more questions than answers.
I feel like that's pretty typical from Malevolent to end with more questions than answers.
It'd be boring if that was the case.
Okay, for those who are new, Parker was dead before Malevolent started, and those who have created some theories about Parker somehow still being alive or around in some way are long established in the Discord. The running theme is that anytime there's a new character that's introduced or someone says something suspicious, people will come in and say, it's Parker, or maybe that's Parker, down to, pretty much everything and everyone. Now, I'm not. We call those Parker truthers, people who believe very strongly that Parker is alive, despite the fact that, we were hanging out with his corpse and we did a lot of stuff. I
That makes it
think,
sound so horrible when you say it like
well, I mean,
that.
because not only did we actively like see it, well, quote unquote see it, we had to move it um into the closet, but also we got to interact with it again in intermezzo, so we've seen it multiple times. The dude's dead. But I have to say, this got me thinking about the Parker truthers because, the blood and sand story is very strongly tied to Parker, and we know that it's kind of the iconic thing, right? It's kind of symbolizing that relationship. So while I am not a truther, I do think this is something that maybe suggests that Parker is in the waylay or in some way has something to do with the waylay. I don't think that's a weird conclusion to jump to, and
Yeah.
shame
Yeah.
on
Well,
me if I'm falling for a red herring, but I think it's pretty explicitly clear.
Fish is also mentioned in chat. I think it's graduated from Parker is alive to Parker is going to show up in the show. I feel that that would be very fun. I do very much agree because I was actually mulling over this last night on who would know Arthur's drink order. And the only people I can think of at the moment are John, Kane, maybe, I suppose in theory, or Parker or Oscar. I suppose it's suggested that, I mean, Oscar's implied to be alive. Noel knows nothing about it. I guess we can assume that Noel is still in quote unquote Spain. And at the moment, I'm carrying on with the idea that the Waylay is completely separate from Kane, and Kane might not even know about the Waylay. I don't know. So I think it's a strong possibility. It might be Parker. Again, maybe it is a red herring. Maybe it's a little bit of cheese dangling over us.
Well,
But
it certainly wouldn't
oh,
be the first time. And I also think that it's worth mentioning, first of all, we've seen Arthur, I keep saying seen. We know that Arthur does do things outside of the listener's perspective. We had that whole rope in of the butcher. That was a whole, like, that had to be multiple conversations and scenes that took place that we just didn't get to be part of. So, I mean, if you want to go that far, maybe Noel does know, Arthur's blood and sand story. Maybe, that there are things that we may not be privy to now. I don't think that's super likely. I think I may just really want to see Noel again. But I also acknowledge that, if he's in the way, like, he's probably means he's dead. And I'm choosing to believe that if I didn't see it on screen, if I didn't see his corpse on screen, he's not dead. But I do think that there is a good chance that this might just be cheese dangling, like you said, because I just think that Parker is such a, I mean, it was the beginning of the story. It was technically the incident that started Malevolent, and it feels weird that we haven't gotten it yet, but also at the same time, if not now, when? I don't know. KM just posted a infamous graphic in the chat. We have an emoji on Discord for Parker Truthers that is that was drawn, I believe, by KM and put in the Discord for quite some time now. KM is one of the cultists in the Malevolent Discord, the Invictus Discord, and there is a version, drawn by Mar. Thank you for the correction. Mar drew it, and this graphic is beautiful. It has a lot of text on it. I don't know. Should I read it? I don't know. Would that kill the joke? Maybe. Haha, kill the
no,
joke.
I say go for it because some people might not even know what it looks like. So
Okay, that's fair. Okay, so it says, "Hey, look at me. Look at my eyes. He could be alive. He could be. We don't know. It's possible. We only know what John says, okay? And he lies sometimes. Arthur didn't see the body. How would John even be able to confirm with Parker? Did Parker reintroduce himself? Huh? Did he? John is an unreliable seeing eye entity, okay? Look at me." And then in all caps, it says, "Arthur didn't see the body. Parker could be Noel. He could be," and it cuts off, and then it says Arthur didn't see, and it cuts off again. So it's just this rambling text box behind an anonymous corpse with a post-it note over its face and a question mark. It's an excellent emoji. If it's still around, you should look at it. It's very good.
I do think it's it's really funny. Recently I've been on a bit of a Parker kick, really been enjoying just like the different fan and interpretations of who Parker is. Please tell me if you hear explosions. The fireworks have begun. Um,
I don't hear
but
anything,
somebody,
Peppers. You're fine.
oh, brilliant. Somebody mentioned in chat as well that it could potentially be Scratch, since technically the stone was in Arthur's pocket. I mean, it's plausible, but at the moment, for me, it's a bit of a stretch. I mean, it is also a bit of a stretch to say Parker, it's Parker. Oh. But I also think it's less of a stretch to assume that it's Parker rather than it's the stone of Scratch.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I think Scratch is a potential. I think everything is a potential. Malevolent has taught us that we don't know what we think we know. It's very good at surprising us. I mean, personally, there are so many things that I could never have seen coming in Malevolent already, and we have explicit and direct confirmation that the narrative has told us outright, especially sort of cemented by Intermezzo. I think this is not your version of the world that you know. This is, I mean, everything from the mythos to the people who are established characters have things that you may not be fully. I'm so sorry. Our electricity keeps going in and out, so, but only in part of our house. So if you're beeping, that's what it is. Um,
I love that.
so yeah, I mean, we have no real nothing is trust nothing and nobody. I think that it could be pretty much anyone. I'm interested in what is up with Yorick. This is one of the two chapters now where I have gotten have become less and less confident that Yorick was ever a good idea. Now, did we have a choice? No, but I don't know. This was very unsettling.
Yeah, and I just started re-listening to the entirety of Malevolent. I started season 1 again today. And it's fascinating listening to episode 3. I think it's 3 or 4 voices where he meets Kellen and he meets the Vanguard, and the Vanguard purposefully requests that it go to Arthur and it accompany Arthur. The question is, has Yorick, the Vanguard, so on and so forth, has it sensed something with Arthur since the very beginning? Is this kind of a predestined sort of situation? Because again, the Vanguard says you are the DSRA and you will see. Girly Pop, what does that fucking mean?
Yeah, the
Is
riddles.
Yorick? Yeah. Well, the question for me is, motherfucker, can you see into the future, or are you just? Is he just really into the theme of being a spooky skeleton skull? And he's like, I know how to freak Arthur out right now, and I'm gonna say something really ominous.
Yeah, and well, and it's funny because DSRA and all of that, it was not until like it was introduced in Malevolent that I started realizing how often it is used. Like I've started seeing it everywhere now. It's just that I don't think it's intentional. It's just like that funny thing that happens when you start to notice a thing for the first time, and it's always been that way. It just pops out at you now. I mean, there have been commercials I've seen, ads I've seen where they use that for comedic effect. There's, I mean, it's very synonymous with doom and gloom and death and the end of the world and things like that. And I don't love that he knows things that are clearly important, and he's not giving us any information about that. I guess he's not technically obligated to, but boy, it sure makes me feel weird about carrying him around. I don't know. It's unsettling that we're lugging around this thing that has such knowledge and power, and we have been for a very long time. I mean, we know that even though he hasn't been able to speak, that doesn't mean that has been ignorant to everything that's gone on so far. Seer of Time puts it, well, the boys need to ask Yorick questions. That is how he operates. But I'm sure that would be a little bit too easy.
I was on mute for a second. Something else as well. I feel like he's absolutely hiding things. That's personally the vibe that I got. Is that especially when it came to the waylay, uh, I felt like he paused just a little bit. He paused just a little bit when Arthur asked Yorick, "What do you know about the waylay?" And he goes, "I am only knowledgeable on the dark world and this current world." And yeah, perhaps that's a little bit of Yorick thinking, but when has Yorick had to think? I
Yeah.
guess, yeah.
Well, it just, I don't know. Now that we've had that whole Gun of Lang situation, I'm closely listening to like every potential audio cue, everything that could lead to us being able to figure out something that we're not being explicitly told. Um, and so I guess it's interesting to me that I also did hear that pause, Peppers, just so you know, I'm with you. I heard that.
Oh, good, good. You're with me. I understand Yorick is sus, and he's always been sus. But he's especially sus now that he's asking about the Hag's Hand. I'm very curious as to what's gonna occur in the future. But you know what? I will also say he's been a very fun companion. I'm not gonna lie. Um, I've really been enjoying his company. I do suspect, I don't know, maybe just because I'm a pessimist, I'm like he's gonna fucking kill them. Something horrible is gonna happen
Yeah.
because this is a horror podcast.
Yeah, no, I feel very much the same way. I love what Yorick adds to the scenes of Malevolent. I think he was very much necessary due to the fact that um that like I, I think this something tells me this season of Malevolent, while it's going to be very dense and like hopefully plot heavy and very, I don't want to say serious like Malevolent has been serious, but I just think it's such a tonal, it might be a tonal shift or a shift for the narrative, that something like Yorick is really refreshing to have a very brief moment of comedy, a couple of lines here and there. I mean, for me personally, that element of Yorick's slightly off one-liners or questions have made the episodes for me. I may be distrustful and skeptical, but he's hilarious, and I don't want to lose that. I hope we get to keep him for a long, long time because he's hysterical.
Yeah, and I will say I've been really enjoying how he's used very carefully. Because initially I remember first hearing about York and I was like, oh God, is he gonna kill the emotional momentum? I have a very everybody has their personal opinion. I initially was like, oh no, is this going to be a case of a kind of a comedy guy being introduced and it just kills the pacing or it kills the emotional weight? But no, he's been used very well, very carefully, um, while also having that ominous edge that still ties him to what he is, which is the Vanguard, while also making him Yorick, this, jester. It's been very, very refreshing, as you've said. This very much in the same when season 4 started, and it was this hilarious opening of the train scene. And having that extra just humor really made season 4 like, oh, such a breath of fresh air, especially after season 3, which was agonizing. It was one like horrible shit
Yeah.
fest after another, after another,
Yeah.
after another. And then we have, Wham Bam, Arthur dying. in episode or in season 5, but it's been handled very well with Yorick also being this comic relief, but also not. Also something else. It doesn't feel like it's just a trope to be kind of fitted into. It's this wholly fleshed character that we just haven't learned more enough about.
Yeah. I think that sums it up really well. I just for the record, Nikki did correct us and said all the initial questions had a pretty long pause before he answered, as that was in regards to Yorick and, why he took a pause. So, I mean, we could be jumpy and suspicious for no reason, but I think we're jumpy and suspicious for a very good reason. It may not be the pause, but dude's acting weird. Don't like it. Don't like it. Yeah, so we have a couple of good comments here I'm going to read out. KM says Yorick is useful for putting John and Arthur on the same page. They aren't constantly at each other's throats with a common annoyance. He's going to be a great foil, going to be able to manipulate them to his own end. And Graham says, I'm so intrigued by the depth we've seen from Yorick. It seems like there's so much more to him than we know. I think about his monologue in part 43 a lot. Yeah, I think that's really smart way to say it as far as him being a foil to John and Arthur, and I think it's going to unite them more often than it will put them against each other. I love that we also have a new reason for John and Arthur to explain things more with Yorick around. Like, there's a potential for Yorick to not have as much of a grasp on human things as John and Arthur already do, or for them to kind of potentially fill in a couple of gaps in Yorick's knowledge here and there, which I'm always ready for. I'm always excited about.
Yeah,
And
I agree.
briefly, I will just say I pulled up the transcripts because I was looking for something, and it just occurred to me that some folks did not know what the word waylay meant as a verb, because that is, if you don't know, because it's not super commonly used. Waylay is a real word, and the way John used it was appropriate, but basically it's a verb that means to lie in wait or to temporarily stop the movement or progress of someone or something. It's, I mean, from what I've heard, it's traditionally used in like a negative slant. I'm not saying that's how it's being used in Malevolent, just as a word itself. Yeah, I know that there are a lot of non-native English speakers that listen to Malevolent, and sometimes providing that context can be helpful. So I just wanted to give that side note. But I also want to say that I think it's really weird that Yorick doesn't have any idea about what the waylay is. Not because I think he necessarily would have ever been there, but the fact that he, quote unquote, has one foot in the dark world and one foot wherever he is currently. You would think that if the waylay was like a normal thing, that a lot of people in the dark world might have at least heard of it or had some kind of something to think or say about it. I don't know. It's still really unclear to me as far as like how much Yorick gets out of looking around in the dark world, or like what the capacity for that knowledge is. But I think it's weird that he doesn't have any idea what that is. Either that or he's just not decided not to tell us.
Yeah. Now, something I'll also ask you, Queen, how are we feeling about Arthur and John's kind of growth between each other, especially regarding John's deal? I think we decided, or we estimated last week, that Arthur would be very understanding of the deal John struck with York, and it turns out he very much was. And I feel like this is especially after starting to re-listen to Malevolent. They're very understanding of each other. They totally understand, why they did the things that they did. So for me, it was very sweet that Arthur's like, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it can be really hard to remember how far these two have come if you don't regularly re-listen, and I'm a person who doesn't. I traditionally don't re-listen to pretty much anything, not because I don't want to, just because that's how my brain works. And I really have to pay attention when these big character shifts happen to feel the weight and impact of them. But even without re-listening, re-ingesting the content frequently, I was so impressed by all of the maturity that both of them have shown throughout this entire season. I mean, things that would have been a really big argument in season 1 or 2 are now just decisions that are made, and they don't need a whole, a big deal made about them. So, there's a lot of there's something to be said about how far they've come with each other, especially. I think people I understand the perspective of feeling really bad for both of them. The perspectives of, they both kind of get a bad deal. Their situations are not ideal for either one of them, and it can be really troubling in a lot of ways to have to hear them go through it. um, and I think especially right now, there's a lot of sympathy out there for John, who has had to go through such a big growth moment. And we were all, I know that I personally at least was really waiting on that. I wanted John to have his big identity moment, his big revelation, and I think that was really rewarding and satisfying to hear. I also think that Arthur has seen how much John has grown, and I think he's finally getting to not just reflect on it, but now actually put into action treating John like his own person. And I think Arthur's getting better at embracing that John is more than something he has to teach. He's not a fragment of a god that needs to be explained to anymore. John has grown beyond what he was, and that's so much part of because of how Arthur and Lily and everybody else has influenced him. And I think we're really getting to see the payoff of that growth and all of the struggle and how many times they've argued and fought throughout the season. I I know that there have been jokes about being stands, quote unquote, for one or the other. My favorite benevolent joke is I'm a John stan. I always think that's really funny. I will just say it out of hand when I'm talking about Malevolent all the time with my friends. But I think for me it's really hard to even pretend to pick sides of Arthur and John. I think it's they're they're a team. Do not separate. They're not to be put against each other. And I don't know. I know everyone has their preferences and favorites, but I think that they are both their own wonderful things, especially as symbols in a narrative. But yeah, I mean, how have you felt, Peppers, after I've just talked for like 10 minutes and gotten emotional?
No, it's fine. I do find it very funny that you're the John stan, and I have not hidden this at all. I'm a huge Arthur Gurley. Shout out to my Arthur Gurleys in chat. I love me some Arthur. But I have really been enjoying John's growth recently. In fact, episode 43 just came out publicly. Um, Past the patrons, and we've gotten to see their reactions, the public reactions, and I think people are just so impressed by John's growth, and I feel like a mom. I feel like a mom going, "Oh
Yeah.
my gosh, you did that! You figured that out." But it's more than that because it's tough. It's tough to figure out, to determine what he is and what he isn't. And what I really like is that John has reached this honesty that I've always agreed with, which is, well, John can't be smushed into this idea of a human because he's not, and he'll never be a human, and that's fine. He is gaining humanity, but it doesn't mean that he's human. He's also part. I mean, he is a god. He is a fragment of a god. That has been his entire life, and he can't just ignore that. And he also can't, in my opinion, cast it aside. He's both. And his ability to decide that on his own without, I don't want to say his opinion being colored by Arthur, but I mean, has a bias, absolutely, I think. And I think John is the best to decide kind of who he is. So I'm really proud of John this season. Um, I don't think my pedestal that I've put Arthur on will ever be usurped. But season 5 has really proven to be a great kind of John focused season. At least the beginning. I've really been enjoying it.
Yeah, I get you. And look, just because I can't choose doesn't mean other people, shouldn't have to. I mean, I totally think that it's easy to see how people would side, quote unquote, side with one or the other. I am the type of person who, foolishly or not, gets very, for a better word, emotional, passionate when I have to consider how Malevolent might end and if they will be separated, in what capacity, what does that look like? Because I personally just cannot. I don't want to imagine them separated, and I know that will be part of the point, right? To go through that process of grief, because it will be grief for me personally. But I also want to say, I think it's important to reflect on how Malevolent is a story about Arthur and John and their relationship and their journey on top of everything else. And the environment that they're in has to support that. I mean, it has to contribute to their relationship, right? So if you're reading a novel or if anyone's read young adult literature at all in any point in time, the gimmick is that the hero of the story, the protagonist, the person that you're reading the perspective of and following, is always going to have some kind of a special superpower or be the chosen one or, you know, be in some way unique, even if that isn't literal. They're just something about them is different from everything else in the story, and something makes them different, whether that's internal, external, inherited, whatever it is. And it's important to remember, especially for me, because I can lose track of this and kind of over rationalize things. You wouldn't be following the character if they weren't unique, if they weren't different, if the story didn't give them something to be different with. You wouldn't be following them, which to me reminds me in Malevolent specifically that all of the characters that we have get to see, Oscar, Noel, Marie, even Eddie from the very, very beginning, all of those characters are, for a reason, side characters, because they are all here to support and contribute to Arthur and John's story. And they're there to interact with them, to show the reader slash listener in this case, that growth and that development, and have conflict happen to them or have them engage in conflict. And I think there lately, especially after part 43's release, I've just seen a lot of chatter on the internet about Malevolence, secondary and tertiary characters and all of the amazing voice acting, people still figuring out that this is all just done by one guy. Those posts are in tags on all social media platforms, like constantly. It's really fun to see people have to get told, yes, even that character was just Harlan. And I love that they all contribute in a unique and specific way to Malevolent story, and that for every character there is a huge fan community that is like overwhelmingly in love with them. From characters who barely have names to characters that appeared for a couple of chapters at most. I mean, I'm pretty sure if I dove deep into social media, I'd find somebody who are like really gung-ho in their headcanons about those two cops that, got messed up on the boat.
They have an affair. They
Yeah.
have a secret affair with each other.
Yes, there's like a whole, I'm sure there's a whole
Like that.
backstory. Um, yeah,
Well, and other people, absolutely loving Parker. It was so funny. I've really been, oh my gosh, the community has been like phenomenal with building these side characters. I agree with you, Queen, that they are side characters, but I think what's also so fun is when they're kind of left, they're left open. They can be used so beautifully to make such brilliant characters. Like, for example, I've been loving the Parker depictions lately. It's been like phenomenal, but I don't think that would be able to explored unless it's inside of a fan fiction, because I mean, number one, when I listen to Malevolent, yeah, it's nice to listen to, like, I don't know, Oscar, for example, or Charlie, for example. These guys are great. Love them to death. But if it was a whole, like, half episode just about Oscar, I'd be like, holy shit, can we go back? We go back to my boys. It's
Yeah.
centered around it's centered around Arthur and John. And I think it's, especially in the format that they're in, very tough, practically impossible to kind of flesh out these side characters in anything but what you briefly see about them. And I think that's what makes fan fiction so much fun, and so exciting, is seeing everybody's different interpretations of characters. Seer of Time in chat says, so Peppers, what you're saying is we all have separation anxiety when it comes to being away from John and Arthur. I will agree. I've been stressed.
See, and I agree with you more or less. I personally am like crazy about side characters because my brain gets most creative when I know less about the character. So I know too much about John and Arthur to really have a ton of fun with them in my own brain and come up with like crazy, unique, creative stuff because they're kind of already having that adventure. Harlan's writing it. I don't really need to be involved in that, but I'm going to let him do his thing. But where I get my like kind of intellectual stimulation, I guess you could say, is from thinking about characters that you don't get a lot of time with, like, you know, Yellow.
How about Anna Stanzik
Or
in the
yeah,
chat?
yeah, Anna Stanzik, for that one guy out there, like Yellow or Marie or Oscar or Noel. I mean, for me, they're all such amazing superstars in their own right. But what I like about them is that there's so much room for us to hang out with them on our own terms in our own way, write their stories, come up with what we think led to that canon moment that or what happened afterward. I think that's so exciting and fun. So like, yeah, as much as I would love more Noel content, I I'm okay if that's the last time we see him. I'm okay with that, especially those ambiguous endings. Poor sweet Butcher. You don't come back from what happened to the Butcher. So,
No,
um,
I will cry. I will cry, brother. There's a whole like 40 chapter fan fiction in my head where the butcher becomes like the biggest badass in the dark world. You cannot take that from me.
that's great. See, that's another thing. Like, there's a whole literal named world out there for us to hang out and play in if we miss a thing. I don't know. I just think it's really hard to balance a story in such a specific way. Um, I'm getting pinged in poll chat. Why am I getting pinged in poll chat? Oh, it's my own poll. Okay, really briefly, I have to touch on this. There's no poll this week. I had to make my own poll
That's right. I was going to ask you about this.
because I refused. I will not stand for a no poll week. I don't know what to do if there's no poll. Um, so I pitted Alexander and Blinky against each other. Alexander,
Ooh.
the current pet of the season, and Blinky is the lamp effed from oh gosh, guys, what season? Guys.
Season two. Season
Okay,
two.
season two. Thank you. Um, and of course, like I knew, Blinky won, despite being seemingly less known and
Shout
having
out, Blinky.
yeah, a Blinky dominated by like 62%, like a huge margin of
Wow,
voters for
I'm
Blinky.
actually shocked.
Yes. So I win. Alexander does, but I want everyone, especially I don't know if Dippity actually listens to these, but I want everyone, especially Dippity, to listen very closely to me. I'm gonna get real close to the mic. The owl doesn't have babies. The owl is fine. The owl is not the focus of the show. Let the owl go. I cannot tell you how that owl influenced damn votes, and it drove me up the wall. And what's funny is I love animals, and so like that you like I would have had no issue with Alexander. I would have no beef, no tea with Alexander here, except for the fact that everyone was trying to use him to sway their votes about going up or down the ladder, and it was a whole thing. And people are like, oh, the owl's a secret spy, or like a polymorph, or the owl belongs to Cain's daughter and stuff like that. And like, look, okay, yeah, and you have logic, facts, and reason on your side, and I'm petty. Okay, I don't like that owl got in my way. Um,
Oh
I
my God.
I'm glad that he's here. He's cute. I hear the little hoots in the background, but I have a beef with that particular owl.
Yeah, the owl needs to shut the fuck up. This is what Queen has to say to us all. Shut that damn owl up.
When the owl gets involved in my vote, then I have a problem. No, I specifically was thinking like there were so many frustrations I had when I was hearing Alexander come back this last chapter. I was like, John didn't describe the owl, didn't say anything about the fact that it was like the same owl. Arthur is just hearing a random owl make a noise that every owl can make and going, it must be the same owl. And I was like, please don't let it be the same owl. But I know it was meant to be the same owl, and I get it.
Listen, he trauma dumped. He trauma bonded. He trauma bonded with that owl.
Bonded with the owl.
So 3 days later, he's been in hell, basically. He hears
dying.
that owl. No, he knows. He knows it's Alexander.
Fish says, dude, that owl is not normal. Yeah, it's the only owl I've ever disliked. That's what's not normal about the owl, okay? Anyway, we didn't have a poll this week, and I was very sad about it. So I made a poll. It barely filled the void. Up here for everyone's viewing enjoyment is what I looked like in my own head, grief counseling, for my lack of a poll.
Yeah. And you know what? Because you briefly mentioned when you said grief counseling, I was brought back to when you said that you would be mourning the possibility of John and Arthur separating. Do you still think that's going to happen? Because I know in episode 43, John mentioned how he is a part of Arthur and Arthur's a part of him now. And they're, from what I grasped from that episode, maybe I need to re-listen to it. It sounded like John has kind of concluded that he's okay with being a part of Arthur. Now, me personally, I'd prefer that they separate, but that's because I have a thing about their closeness and how that can very quickly become toxic, and I just need them to like sleep in separate beds. I feel like their mental health would be so much better if they just did that.
So, first of all, I have to say, I did notice during John's amazing emotional speech that he did at the end sound a little bit dependent there about together we're whole. And I do think that is not a great sign as far as like emotional codependency goes. However, I mean, there's gotta be, it reminds me very much of the journey that you have with parts of yourself as you mature and grow up, and discover who you are independent of how you've been raised or the environment that you've been around your whole life. It really reminds me of wanting to hang on to a piece of that, like regardless of who you are now and how distant you may feel from the way you used to be, being, not to glorify it, but being part of having that history does shape who you are. Now, it doesn't mean it has to I would never wish something terrible on somebody just because it made them who they are today or anything like that. I'm just saying that I think the sentiment was very much one of like their relationship together has been such an influence on both of them that without the other, they wouldn't be the same. And I think that is going to mean, to me, it was kind of the nail in the coffin that I haven't wanted to talk about, and I haven't even said to any of my friends because it makes me very emotional. I do think that kind of means that we're definitely going to have to see them separate at the end. I think it is a big sign of John and Arthur being so entwined in each other that eventually they have to stand on their own. And it's great that John is forming this identity, but I will remind everybody this is the beginning of season 5, and we just got this huge identity declaration from John. So much has happened, and that's 3 episodes into the season. Like, there is something so significant to me about that number and how early this has happened. That means it's not just about establishing this identity. Now it's going to be maturing through that identity and learning how to do it on his own. And yes, we saw a brief demonstration of him doing it on his own and forging that identity for himself while Arthur was dead. But that in a more permanent style is going to have to look different. And I think that means that we are going to get to see them separate. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know if I'm ready to even think about that without having a moment. But I think it's a big sign narratively that, yeah, they are going to be separated. I don't know if that's, I mean, people are saying in the chat, you know, I love, Graham says, I love messy codependent relationships. Got to be honest. KM says, if we have a lose John to gain Faroe situation, I'll riot, just FYI. I honestly don't think. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Kane's deal and bringing Faroe back and whether or not people want to see that. I honestly think it would really take take a lot of the impact of that whole story out of it if Faroe came back in any way, shape, or form. I
No, I
personally,
agree.
I can't imagine that actually working in any like satisfying capacity. So I don't think that's ever going to be a realistic possibility. I think it might get thrown around as a concept like Kane used it, or there might be hints and vague ideas of talking about it or something like that. Arthur is definitely going to be swayed by it, or thinking about it.
Oh, you know, I actually wanted to talk about this because I was actually thinking about it this week. It's very clear that Arthur doesn't trust Kane. And I don't think Arthur thinks that Kane will keep his word of, oh, you know, I'll separate you guys into separate bodies and then I'll also give you Faroe. I don't think he believes that that's going to happen. But I do believe it planted a seed in him of thinking of the possibility of meeting Faroe. And the fact that, you know, when he dies, he's thinking about meeting Faroe, and the fact that he didn't meet her, to me, makes me wonder, is Arthur already thinking of the fact that the only way he's going to meet Faroe ever again is to die? Just a lot of questions, I guess, on my front of he's already thinking of how he's going to see Faroe again. I don't think he thinks he's going to see her again while alive. Which is, I don't know, very compelling to me. I just found it very interesting.
Well, because I think it says something significant about how Arthur has dealt with this grief his whole life and how that event shaped him, that I'm sure before all of this started, he did think about the fact that the next time he would see Faroe is if he died. If he were any kind of religious, and that whole concept of, you know, I've had to not believe that there's anything after this because, you know, I mean that whole portion of that chapter where he was talking with John about her waiting for him, it to me it became very, it planted that seed in my mind of what stops Arthur from, you know, what motivates him right now. What is the thing he's working toward? Because like you said, it's definitely not getting Faroe back from Kane, because I think Arthur and all of us know that's not going to happen. We'll be lucky if Kane doesn't explode us on sight after he has his stone. I'm just saying, I think that Arthur, now that he's got this memory of the Waylay and he's got more information about the Dark World and he's got Yorick, I don't know, there's some things to be figured out there. I will say that the Dark World, for anyone who was unsure, like I was for a very long time, and that's not a commentary, I think, on anyone's intellect or ability to process it. I personally didn't know for the longest time that the Dark World was a bad thing. I mean, like an objectively bad thing. I saw it as like a kind of purgatory place where, you know, it wasn't fun, but it also, you know, wasn't miserable. Of course, the last, you know, short while has taught me better. But that does mean, you know, good news. Furrow is not in the Dark World. There's no way, which is a good thing. So we'll see. I'm really interested to see what comes of what's to be found in the Waylay. I think that's going to be more significant to the narrative than is even implied right now. Because right now it's a distant seed that has been planted in a far, far field, but I'm very excited about it.
Yeah. And you know that you mentioned, and I find it very interesting. I like what is Arthur's goal right now? Because prior to them being dumped in in medieval England, Arthur was like, let's just leave. Let's just leave and let's quote unquote go home. Which to me implies that he never saw um America as home, maybe. He's always seen England as home. I just don't know. That's a question for another time. But what is Arthur's like goal right now? Personally, what I'm hoping for is this kind of idea of Arthur and John have lied for each other, have protected each other, have died for each other, and now what I'm hoping is this season Arthur learns to live for John, not to die for him.
Yeah.
And him to find that motivator for the rest of his life of what do you what do you want to do once this is over. I find that very fascinating.
Yeah, especially because I really want to believe that John has taught Arthur to look at the world through fresh eyes again, because there are so many moments even now of John being overwhelmed or excited by or amazed at humanity, and just, I will never forget hearing him, you know, take in the city for the first time, or being surprised by little things that humans do, and listening to Marie talk and how quiet he was while she spoke with Arthur at the end. um I think that those moments, I hope that Arthur is learning from them that, humanity is really something special and a big deal. We have that short thing that Arthur said from the poll choice with when he first met Kane about being, quote unquote, the best and worst of humanity, which obviously was like not to be taken literally. We know that Arthur is not the best nor the worst of humanity, but I think that specifically, I think the only thing Arthur can work toward right now is not having that punishment inflicted on him. I think that's a big motivator for me personally. Whenever I think about what's our goal here, it's to get the Blackstone, whether or not we want to. Because right now, if I were Arthur, that would be pretty much the only thing driving me, is not to see my loved ones tortured forever.
Oh my gosh, KM just said something phenomenally fucked up in chat. KM just said, showing Arthur what Kane could do, parentheses, turn the water off, was just a manipulation tactic. Who's to say Kane wasn't the one to turn it back on to begin with, to manipulate this exact scenario into existence? That is so messed
Yeah,
up.
that
And
is
that's so Kane. That's so
phenomenally
horrible.
phenomenally Kane canon. Yeah, I agree. I think that Kane is very aware that, I mean, when it comes to your kid, you're the most easily manipulated. This is why people give ransom money. This is why people do crazy things, to save the people they love the most. And especially in the case of a very innocent child. So I think I think that is not as unlikely as we all want to hope. But yeah, that sounds about right. I want to just close by saying, there's been a lot of conversation around 43, and not all of it's been positive. I mean, it's the internet, that's kind of, there will be something for everyone to say everywhere. And I am not, just because this autopsy is wonderfully, lovingly, kindly supported by Harlan and Co. That doesn't mean that I think Malevolent's the most perfect piece of media in the universe and has never had anything wrong with it ever. Everyone, is it has room to grow, and I think you can see how Harlan has improved over the 5 seasons of weekly content that he's been pushing out for so long. I do want to encourage everybody to be as open and candid with your enjoyment of the show as possible, because even though you think that what you've said has already been said, it hasn't been said by you. And it really makes a difference when you're the person who says it. And you may think it's exactly what somebody else says, but coming from you, it will mean something different to everybody. So, I've seen a lot of people saying, someone, oh, I'm just echoing somebody else's words, but like really get out there and talk about how much you enjoyed it or what you liked about it, or, what exciting possibilities you can see out there, what's going to happen next, or like even better, what other possibilities of what could have happened, if the butcher's head hadn't gotten shot off, or if Noel hadn't been teleported to Spain, if he and Arthur and John would be having adventures in England all together, like hanging out where John could talk to somebody outside of Arthur's head. I'm so emotional.
You sound like you're about to lose it.
There's a world.
Graham, which is the number one Anna Stanzik fan, it just said, if Anna Stanzik, and then that's the end of the sentence.
Yeah. If that, I mean, there's so many fun and exciting things, and like, even if you've never done it before, try creating something, even if it's just a text post on a website, even if it's a tweet about what you think could happen, what you would want to see happen, what you like about it, who's your favorite minor character, things like that. I think that would be really fun in the future. I'd like to do on these no poll weeks, I'd really like to do some polls about who's your favorite minor character. Maybe we'll do an episode devoted to your favorite minor character, or something like your favorite old part or vote or chapter or something like that. We're floating around some ideas, but as you've seen, Peppers and I can just talk by ourselves about an absolutely no vote week for an hour with absolutely no problem. So think about what you would want to talk about on these weeks where we don't have a vote to argue about. And we'll see how it goes, because I would love to start making that something we can do on a regular basis. And I really want to hear from you guys about what you want in this podcast. But yeah, by the way, thank you so much to, we've had a couple of people transcribing our episodes really regularly, and it's been super, super helpful. And I am so appreciative. Graham, our number one Anna Stanzik fan, and newly added Worm, that's with a Y. Wonderful, beautiful people. Thank you so, so much for transcribing. It's super helpful. I know a lot of people have audio processing issues or might be hard of hearing, and it's really kind of you to be able to do that. Thank you for listening to my voice for so, 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 so long. Yeah, and I think that's about it. Peppers, is there anything else you want to add?
To just a final conclusion, as I am definitely more creatively inclined. Not everybody is, and that's okay. You don't have to feel compelled to create something if that's just not your vibe. But if you are creatively compelled, I strongly encourage you guys, please write some fan fiction. I want to read so many sad fan fictions. Please, God, I'm begging you. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Well, okay, for every one sad one that Peppers wants, I need you to like promise me a really nice one. Bonus points if it has Noel in it. And also don't forget that creativity is first and foremost self-expression, and what you write / draw / make can never be wrong, because it's from you and it's your thing and you made it. So don't be afraid to do it, even if you only show one person, even if you show nobody. I love you all so much, especially you, Peppers. You're the best.
Oh, I love you too.
Everyone, I would love to hear your feedback about how you think this episode went, especially because it was a no vote week, so it had a little bit less structure. I appreciate all of you, and I will see you later, Peppers. See you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, and definitely not tomorrow.
Definitely not tomorrow. To shop for Halloween decorations in July.
No, definitely not. Yeah. Happy Halloween, everybody.
Happy Halloween, everybody.